Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hardware Podcast. My name is Jackson Danner alongside my good friend Omar Borja. Today we are going to be going back to our roots, so to speak, as a college football awards podcast and talking about and previewing the Heisman Trophy as the ceremony is this weekend following the conclusion of the Army-Navy game. But Omar, first of all, how you doing, man? How you feel about these bowl matchups and what are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. There's a lot of good bowl matchups. I know this bowl season will be the winter of bowls for the Borja family. We're going to three bowl games this year throughout the Southwest and the Pacific West too. But it should be a fun time seeing these matchups. And I mean, talk about starting the bowl season with a bang. I feel like every single year from now on, like ESPN has something great going with the Cure Bowl, where it's like on the opening Friday night of bowl season, where you just have amazing matchups. Like last year was Coastal Carolina versus Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois being the MAC champion. That game did not disappoint as there was just not enough time on the clock for Northern Illinois last year. This year we have, the closest thing to a near six within the group of five, where you have UTSA, Conference USA champion, 11 game winner, and Troy, Sun Belt champion, 11 game winner, playing each other. So, I mean, just some great matchups like that. And you can find something you like out of every single one of these matchups. And that's what makes bowl season so beautiful.
Absolutely, man. No, as a Florida fan, I am repping my SRS distribution Las Vegas Bowl hoodie that I recently got off of eBay. So excited for that and to get a good win over Oregon State. So we it's if you're interested, like we are, Omar, in both the All-Star games, starting obviously with the HBCU Pigskin Showdown. And then you're into bowl season. It doesn't matter who's playing in what bowl. You always watch those. And then you're also got a vested interest in the National Football League. December 17th is a pretty busy day on your calendar. So you've got a lot going on that day, which I know I do too. It's going to be, morning to dawn in football. So I'm or dawn to dusk rather in football. But yeah, man, I'm excited for all of this. Celebration Bowl also that day. So a lot of things going on, but this weekend, obviously we have, college game day in the morning, right? You might sleep in a little bit as you're recovering from that 10:30 Eastern time kick in the FCS playoffs. Then you've got, I believe the first game of are the one of two games on Saturday, Holy Cross and South Dakota State. That's going to be a huge one kicking off at noon. Army Navy at 3:30 and the Heisman at night. So some busy Saturdays coming up here for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at all levels of college football, I don't think you have the NAIA playoffs as well, because that championship game's next week. So I think the teams have a bye. But you have D3, D2, as well as, we'll talk about later on, some really great football, some really great players that you'll see in all-star games later on. But it's a great week. It's not as full a slate, but there's impactful football being played on all levels, and that's all we can ask for.
Absolutely, man. Well, we'll go ahead and go into our main portion of the program, going over the Heisman finalists. Obviously, they've been announced in case you live under a rock. It's Max Duggan, the quarterback of TCU, Stetson Bennett, the quarterback of Georgia, Caleb Williams, the quarterback of USC, and CJ Stroud, the quarterback of Ohio State. Omar, I thought we kind of touch on all of these candidates, give both our prediction, and then also who we think is most deserving.
Yeah, sounds good. And I mean, this is one of the more intriguing. I think it's one of the more intriguing yet also frustrating Heisman races, because we don't know who's gonna win, and there's some injury shortened seasons that really could have taken this award. So I think this is
And the
really a ho
number
hum year for the Heisman. Yeah, and Blake Corum. Like, my heart breaks so much for Blake Corum being an old school running back guy. Like, it's gonna be hard for me to live this one down for a while. Like, honestly, until another running back wins a Heisman, I'll be lamenting Blake Corum's injury versus Ohio State. But yeah, yeah.
And what do we always say about Kenneth Walker, Omar? We always say that if Ohio State hadn't happened, we think it's a legitimate shot that he's a Heisman finalist. Blake Corum, man, they took care of Michigan, or they took care of Ohio State. They're an undefeated team. bad spot on the resume except for the fact that he's injured. That is quite literally the only reason that he's not here, or at least he deserves to be there. I don't want to promise on anyone's behalf that he would have been there without the injury, but it's a much more likely scenario, right? You're not going to be a running back that wins the Heisman or is even a finalist if you're injured going into a conference championship week. So Blake Corum and then Hendon Hooker too. Stetson Bennett isn't even the best quarterback in the SEC. I think he's fourth or fifth in all honesty. So I don't know how he found his way to New York. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But Omar, we'll go ahead and start with Max Duggan. What are your impressions of him, and how do you think it could turn out for him in New York?
So I have Max Duggan in second in the Heisman race right now. Because he had a very good performance against Kansas State. They didn't pull out the win, but realistically, like that was the game that TCU and of course, like how it ended up. That's a game that TCU, had to give. Like that was a game that they had in their chamber that they could lose with them being 12-0 in the regular season. Duggan's a good dual threat, which is what you look for typically in your Heisman finalist type quarterbacks. Bryce Young being the exception to the rule, and Mac Jones, which Bryce Young having like not a good year running the ball last year. Same thing with Mac Jones the year prior, being a finalist. But I mean, Duggan pretty much willed that game into overtime. I think he's got a pretty solid Heisman moment compared to everyone else. He's got the game winning drive against Baylor that pretty much saved TCU's season. I don't think a guy like CJ Stroud has a moment like that, nor Stetson Bennett, even though one can say that Stetson Bennett's game against LSU could probably be a Heisman moment, but I'm saying some could, but I got Duggan in second. I just think his stats are so dwarfed by Caleb Williams that and I guess this is spoiling my rankings, but that Caleb Williams does take with Max Duggan coming in second. I just think also too, I think I'd take Duggan over Stroud because of the recency bias. Because of course Stroud didn't play a game in championship weekend, and the voters' last memory of Stroud is of course it wasn't a bad game by any stretch of the imagination against Michigan, but a game where Stroud, I guess, made some mistakes that put Ohio State out of it.
I don't think Ohio State lost that game because of CJ Stroud, but they certainly didn't come close to winning it because of him either. As far as Max Duggan is concerned, man, my impression, of course, you mentioned the Baylor drive, right? And that was a phenomenal one as well. My biggest impression of him, probably one of my most memorable moments of the 2022 college football season, is going to be that last or next to last drive in the Big 12 championship. I think maybe he deserves it off of that drive alone, man, just seeing the way he put the team on his back. And of course it fell short. I just want to say on the losing play, they took the ball out of Max's hands, which is something that I think should be considered. But man, TCU had an objectively successful season this year, right? They made the college football playoff. They didn't just sneak in as a 4. They're in that number 3 spot. I think you take Max Duggan out of TCU, I don't think they have even close to the same season that they have had. I say that with no offense to Chandler Morris, the backup for TCU, but I just don't think they have the emotional, dramatic victories like they have had without Max Duggan. So I have Max coming in second. I think that is the proper place for him. As tempted as I am to put him first, if I had a vote, I can't do that. It's tough, man. It's a lot closer than a lot of first and seconds for Heisman's have been in the recent past. So, but I love Max, man. I'm excited to see how he finishes out the year. I'm excited to see him at the next level as well.
Yeah, so I mean, this Heisman voting kind of reminds me of like the 2001 Heisman race, where it's like, again, there really was not anyone really, eye popping in the game. I mean, the Heisman Trophy ended up going to an option quarterback. Nothing against Eric Crouch, but not only was he an option quarterback, but Nebraska's last game of the regular season was a loss. So we could have that reality where, like, whether it be CJ Stroud or Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy winner's last game, or heck, Max Duggan, the Heisman Trophy winner's last game comes off of a loss, which is like not ideal. And I mean, but yeah, it's just really unique, honestly. It's a really kind of black year.
Well, that's a very likely scenario since 3 of the 4 Heisman finalists are coming off of losses, right? So I think that's something to take note. I'm interested to see, do Heisman voters take it by its literal definition of who is the best player in college football, which is not how we've always seen the voting gone, or is it more by process of elimination of who shouldn't win it? And in that case, Stetson Bennett wins it in a heartbeat. So I'm very curious to see what, I almost said the committee, what Heisman voters' logic is with that. I think that'll be very telling, not necessarily in who wins, but in the order in which it comes in. For 2 through 4, I mean. We'll go ahead and move on to the second candidate, Stetson Bennett, obviously the quarterback from Georgia. Omar, what are your impressions on Stetson Bennett? No one watches more SEC football than you, so I'm really gonna trust your opinion on this.
Wow, when I think about it, I think the most SEC football I've watched this year was Texas A&M UMass. Honestly, now that I think about it, I haven't watched Georgia all year because frankly, I just don't think the SEC has good parity. I mean, I did watch end of LSU Bama, and then I didn't watch SEC title game, but I did watch LSU parts of LSU A&M. While I was waiting at the airport after the Bayou Classic. But yeah, I think what Stetson Bennett is like you say, like I mean, if he wins it, I mean, it would be the best player in the best team, or best quarterback, or quarterback on the best team argument of the Heisman, which is what the Heisman's become, sadly. Nothing against Stetson Bennett. The story's amazing, honestly, and his progression as a player is just so amazing. Where it's actually where instead of like leaning on the run game, like you would have in 2020 when Stetson Bennett wrestled the job away from JT Daniels. Like you can actually put the game in Stetson Bennett's hands, and he'll do good for you. But I just don't think I just think the perception of Georgia, like we talked about it last week, it's a Ken Dorsey effect where it's like there's so much talent around Stetson Bennett that he's not really seen as an X factor. The same thing with Ken Dorsey. There's so much talent around Ken Dorsey on that 2001 and the 2002 Miami team where it's like, you know, is Ken Dorsey even the best player on Miami type of thing? So I mean, Stetson Bennett, I would say if he had a Heisman moment, it would be the SEC title game, where it's just like where they just dominated, put up the most point or second most points all season against LSU, high scoring game. I mean, that's what I think his Heisman moment would be, just that entire game. But again, I think Stetson Bennett ends up being fourth in the Heisman race. Just because there's just so much athletes around him, honestly. And it's like I look at a lot of these games. Maybe the Missouri game is one where he had to put the game in his hands. But even against Missouri, he struggled. He went 24-43, had 300 yards, but that completion percentage is a bit low. So, but yeah, I mean, I just don't think the game was in Stetson's hands enough, except for that Missouri game.
Honestly, man, I think Stetson Bennett falls in next in line in those great NFL UGA made quarterbacks like Quincy Carter and David Green and Aaron Murray and Jake Fromm and DJ Shockley, man, just those
What about
guys
Matthew
that come
Stafford?
out.
You missed one. What about
Yeah,
Matthew
I did miss
Stafford?
that one. That was the only valid one, so I wanted to leave it out. But yeah, no, definitely. In all honesty, man, I think Stetson isn't the best player on the team, much less in college football. There was this stat that I'm sure everyone listening to this has seen, that he's the same age as Lamar Jackson. Perhaps even more shocking, Omar, Stetson Bennett is 3 years younger than Jameis Winston. If that doesn't put it into perspective, I don't think anything will, man. He's older, like he is like an older guy playing around a bunch of 5 stars in a program that doesn't see the toughest schedule. And I just don't think it's deserving, man. If it truly goes to the best player in college football, and not the best player, Omar, the quarterback of the best team, which is what it's become more often than not, then I kind of lose a little bit of faith in the Heisman voters in this. So I'll put it this way. I think if the voting was left to the NFL general managers or scouts or whatnot, people who actually watch the all 22 on these quarterbacks and these players, I don't think that Stetson Bennett would be anywhere near the top of the voting. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think he'll be near the top. I mean, he just has a lot of weapons, and he's had a really good season, 3,400 yards. That's got to be like
Oh,
top
I'm
five
not
all
denying
time.
this
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
statistically
I'm not
had
saying
a
that.
had
Yeah.
a, had a good season, but in that Heisman moment, by the way, absolutely would be the LSU game, but the mic drop moment there. But as opposed to, I don't know, man. I don't think Stetson should win it. But moving on to our next candidate, Caleb Williams, the quarterback from USC. Omar, I'll let you give your thoughts and I'll give mine.
Yeah, so I think Caleb Williams ends up winning it because his stats dwarf everyone's. Like, if we're looking at quarterbacks, all Power Five quarterbacks, then I think stats should be the tiebreaker. Essentially, his stats are superior to Stroud's, of course, Duggan's, and Bennett's. I mean, like Caleb Williams too, he's done it on the ground a lot as well, even more than Max Duggan has. I believe. Actually, let me verify that before I put out some falsehoods. Okay, he has 30 less rushing yards than Max Duggan. He has 10 rushing touchdowns to Duggan 6 touchdowns. I think Williams, it's the same thing. It's kind of the same thing with Stetson Bennett, I think, in a way where USC had a ton of talent. Of course, Jordan Addison going from Pitt to USC, of course, Travis Dye going from Oregon to USC, all those guys entering the transfer portal and just all the talent for USC. But it's just like Caleb Williams. I mean, I think you just look at Caleb Williams, like where USC was a year before without Caleb Williams and where they are now, where USC was 5-7 last year, not making a bowl, and now they went 11-2 in the Cotton Bowl this year with Caleb Williams and company. I don't think that happens without Caleb Williams. Don't get me wrong; you can stick any quarterback in that system, they do well. But I'm not sure if they would be able to, amass 11 wins like they did this year. Kind of the same thing with Max Duggan to a lesser extent. But I think Williams' stats are just so superior that I think in this year the stats are the tiebreaker. I don't think it's like best quarterback on the best team, because if we're best quarterback in the best team, it would be Stetson Bennett or JJ McCarthy winning the Heisman. I got to go with Caleb Williams. And plus Caleb Williams' game style, his play style, it's kind of lends itself to Heisman voters. I think it kind of like meant, I guess, bodes well for Heisman voters. It's exciting. Like, I remember watching him play against Arizona. That man just does not throw checkdowns. He scrambles and scrambles and keeps the play going, throws deep. I mean, he's an exciting player. Like, he's pretty much what the Heisman has become nowadays. So I think Williams wins it all, but we'll see if I'm wrong come Saturday.
I want to put this out. One more thing about Stetson Bennett that I forgot to mention, that there's few people that I trust more in sports media than Jim Nagy, the director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. He has Stetson Bennett as an undrafted free agent. So that's all I'm gonna say on that. Which I tend to agree with that. I think at best he's a day 3 guy. I just don't foresee it working out. But anyways, with Caleb Williams, which is what we are talking about in this block. If we give the Heisman based on definition, right, the best player in college football, in my opinion, the award does deserve to go to Caleb. He does things that just look like they should be impossible. He is the most athletic quarterback in the nation, in my opinion. I think Anthony Richardson is close behind him, but Lincoln Riley has produced some great quarterbacks. You think of Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, obviously all these guys helped in the development of Jalen Hurts, who has had a phenomenal year in the National Football League. And Caleb Williams is next in line in those, right? Caleb is a phenomenal athlete. He can write whatever he wants on his fingernails. He deserves it. So, I think the award should go to Caleb, in my opinion. But we'll get into that next. So, lastly, CJ Stroud, the quarterback from Ohio State. Omar, your thoughts?
Yeah, so CJ Stroud's had an amazing season. And like I said, I think either last week or the week before, that CJ Stroud does not deserve to have the season defined by one game, in a game that he didn't really play bad in, honestly. That, frankly, Michigan just outplayed Ohio State. But Stroud's had a great year. He's definitely more of a pocket passer, and that hurts him a lot in a finals group that has mobile quarterbacks like Max Duggan and Caleb Williams. So he is hurt by that. I think the thing that also hurts CJ Stroud is while one game doesn't define a season, I mean, I think the game against Northwestern too kind of hurts his bid for the Heisman, I think, as well. Even though that game was played in just outrageous conditions, Northwestern was a 1-11 team, and he did only have 76 yards against Northwestern, so weather conditions or not, it's 76 yards versus Northwestern. Not really the best game, but again, I think Stroud's just hurt by, his lack of a quarterback run game, only 74 rushing yards, the least out of the four finalists. And of course, 35 attempts, not counting sacks. He was sacked 8 times this year, so he really only had 27 rush attempts the whole year, which I think is mind blowing in this day and age. He's a super talented quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I just think in this day and age with dual threat quarterbacks being pretty much everywhere, I just think Stroud's game is kind of like, I guess, the least voter friendly of all the Heisman finalists. And I think he ends up in third, still above Stetson Bennett, but I think he ends up in third in the race. Like I said, just due to lack of mobility and just like a poor game against Northwestern, honestly. And that really was his only poor game, but just the fact of how bad Northwestern was this year that, it's kind of hurts him.
I think CJ Stroud, I think voters are going to be hesitant to give it to someone, regardless of talent level, who is 0-2 against their biggest rival and has an NFL wide receiver room around them. I think people just can't get past that. And I'm not saying CJ Stroud deserves to win it, but CJ Stroud, let's face it, he's 0-2 against Michigan. Neither one has been pretty. At least the first one was on the road. And CJ Stroud has legitimately, like, we joke about like Tua had a better receiver room at Bama than he did in Miami for a while, but it was true. And I think like that could be the case at Ohio State. It's TBD on how Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson and everyone will turn out in the NFL. But man, like he has some like weapons to throw to that obviously make him look good. So I think that's going to be tough. If he comes back for another year, which is a huge if, I think it's unlikely. Expect kind of like I'll point to like 1997 Florida Tennessee vibes with Peyton Manning coming back to try and beat Florida one last time. It was at the time the biggest rivalry, right? For both those schools. So I would be interested to see if CJ comes back. It's going to be, I think, in large part that he wants to go out beating Michigan. So I think that'll be a very interesting storyline next year. I same thing. I see CJ Stroud finishing third. I wouldn't be shocked if he finished last in voting, or fourth. I guess I shouldn't say last, but Omar, we'll kind of use that to segue into what do you think will be the final results?
I think Caleb Williams won, Duggan 2, Stroud 3, and Bennett 4 for just the reasons I outlined. I do think Williams ultimately wins it, and I think he's helped by the fact that, like we said, 3 out of the 4 can't finalists are ending their season on a loss. So yeah, I mean that's how I have the ranking shaking out.
Well, that was anticlimactic because I've got the exact same finish there. I think it helps that Caleb Williams was injured. I think that can at least, I think Utah wins that game regardless, but at least it's a question mark in voters' minds. So you can't put it all. And also, I mean, like it kind of helps that game was on Friday night, right? You had like a whole college football Saturday in front of you to, kind of help you forget about that. So probably not if you're a USC or Utah fan, but I think everyone else kind of shoved that in the back of their minds. So I think that certainly helps. Caleb Williams, Max Duggan, I think is going to come in second place in large part due to his performance against Kansas State in the fourth quarter. That was just one of the most phenomenal games I've ever seen individually by a quarterback. And then CJ Stroud, I would rather have CJ Stroud any day as my quarterback over Stetson Bennett. And then Stetson Bennett by process of elimination would be in that fourth place. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point too, with it being a Friday night game, I mean, and it also could work against him where it's like, again, like network TV on Fox is the only, well, one of 2 games on TV if you're watching the UTSA WKU game, but yeah, one
What
of
do
2
you think
games on TV,
Heisman
huge
voters
stage.
were watching, Omar?
Frank Harris. Frank Harris, baby. No, I'm just kidding. Frank Harris is amazing, but unfortunately, I don't think all Heisman voters were watching Frank Harris, which they should, but yeah, no, I gotta agree. But yeah, that's a good point too, that we're just, that recency, but yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. I got a strong feeling that, both of us will be very, very not all the way spot on, but very close, I think, at the very least.
Popular to contrary, or popular to or contrary to popular belief, my apologies. There are 5 games this weekend in the D1 level, and then even more if you go beyond that. Omar, we'll go ahead, and I want to touch briefly on some of these Friday night FCS playoff games. Sanford at North Dakota State, obviously major injury news coming out of North Dakota State and Fargo. I just want to get your thoughts on that matchup.
Yeah, so I mean, North Dakota State's had a bit of a down year this year. I mean, they weren't the top seed, that going to South Dakota State. So they're not top seeds. They have a bit of a tougher path to make the final out there in Frisco, Texas. And it starts here, of course, with Sanford going 10-1 in the regular season, in the SoCon, and their only loss was a 33-0 loss to Georgia. And to be honest with you, that game against Georgia, I mean, they jumped out to a 30-0 lead at halftime, but only scored 3 points in the second half. I mean, I think Georgia let off the dogs early, since Stanford's coach is a former assistant of Kirby Smart's, but nonetheless, last year that Stanford loves to throw the ball. Liam Welch, Montreal, Washington. I'm sure they're in your worst nightmares. That's no different here. As Michael Hires as 3,300 passing yards. So I do think that contrast of styles may kind of may either get them this week against Stanford, or next week, because I think the bracket has them playing Sacramento State, the winner of Sacramento State versus, I think it's Southeastern Louisiana. Let me check. Sacramento State versus Incarnate Word. So you have 3 teams that play just a brand of football that, throws the ball around, a wide open style of football, one that you don't really see in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. So yeah, I mean, I think they're on upset alert for sure in this one.
Definitely, man. Any year that you can see, if you think there's no parity in the FBS, just watch a little FCS football, man. And South Dakota State, North Dakota State, or not South Dakota State, North Dakota State, man, always at the top. So yeah, like you said, they already had a little bit of a tougher path going into it, and then the injury news and all of that they've been barred with certainly isn't going to help. William and Mary at Montana State, and then Incarnate Word at Sacramento State, the other 2 Friday night matchups. Omar, your thoughts?
Yeah, so William and Mary, great defense. John Pius is one of the top 3 finalists for the Buck Buchanan Award, so they're going to come strong. Same thing, Montana State. Montana State game day went to the Brawl of the Wild. And Montana State's got a great defense. That one should be low scoring. I believe that game, I think Montana State does have the higher seed in that game. So yeah, it is a late Friday game. So dealing with the cold out there is going to be such an issue, with it being a night game in Montana. That's going to be such a huge home field advantage. And I'm not sure if William Mary overcomes that, but it should be a close game. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be a close defensive struggle, just the way that both teams play, just the way that both teams, I guess, hang their hat. Even though Montana State's had a bit of a down year on defense, allowing 27 points per game, I think that home field advantage is going to be too much. I mean, player to watch in that one, of course, is Tommy Millott, who, along with Matthew Sluka, is one of only 2 FCS quarterbacks with 1,000 rush yards. So Tommy Millott on a Friday night should be pretty electric.
Absolutely, man. We'll go ahead and go into our lone Saturday matchup in the FCS Holy Cross at South Dakota State.
Yeah, so Holy Cross to South Dakota State. So that one's a rematch of excuse me, playoff game in the 2021 spring season, which of course it did not go Holy Cross's way. Of course, this Holy Cross team is way more improved, but again, I think it's the same thing as well. Like, just come out, play 12 Eastern in South Dakota State in that cold. It's cold, of course, in Worcester, Massachusetts. I lived it for 10 years, but it's not as cold as it is in South Dakota. I just think that the weather is going to play a factor, for both games in North Dakota State and North Dakota State. Sorry, not North Dakota State. Montana State, William and Mary, and then Holy Cross, South Dakota State. After that one, South Dakota State plays tough defense, but it's just like the same type of makeup of that team where you got Mark Gronowski throwing the ball well. Isaiah Davis still is running the ball very well. Holy Cross will have to play a near perfect game, I think, in that one. We did miss Incarnate Word versus Sacramento State. You talk about a contrast of styles. You have Lindsey Scott for Incarnate Word throwing 55 touchdown passes, pretty darn unbelievable. And then you have Sacramento State averaging about 200 yards per game passing, but 240 yards on the ground. That one's the other Friday night game. So intriguing contrast of styles. I just got to think that Incarnate Word, they're just so explosive, and it's just been hard to stop them all year. That Incarnate Word takes that one. So that's all the FCS, I guess, semifinal game or quarterfinals for the week, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely, man. And then I believe there's one game in the FBS. Tell me if you're familiar or not. Going on. I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, so it's the Army Navy game, of course.
I
It's
think we've
Army Navy.
both been to a couple. So you tell me.
Yeah, 3 Eastern CBS, and this one will be the first one since I think 2011 where neither team is bowl eligible. So that kind of puts a damper on this game. I mean, it's always a great game, don't get me wrong, but again, there, at least for me, there's kind of a dark pall around over my head just with because we're about two plays. Yeah, we're like 2 or 3 plays away from being a 7-4 team for sure. So that hurts a lot. We should be playing in Shreveport against Houston. But it is what it is. So with that one, I expect another low scoring Army Navy game because Navy has one of the top ranked rushing defenses in the country, allowing I think 84 yards per game on the ground. The breakout star on that defense, it's amazing. If I told you all the way in August that the pass rusher we would be talking about ahead of Army Navy would have been John Marshall, I think everyone would have looked at me crazy because of the hype that Andre Carter got, especially from Mel Kiper being number 14 on Mel Kiper's big board. But Carter's had a bit of a quiet season, 7 TFLs, I think only 3.5 sacks. But John Marshall, I think arguably, I don't know if he didn't win AAC Defensive Player of the Year, American Conference Defensive Player of the Year, he should have. I'm gonna look that up really quick. I don't think they have it awarded, do they? Oh, Ivan Pace. Ivan Pace won it. Okay. Ivan Pace won American Defensive Player of the Year. So I'm sure John Marshall was a close second because Marshall has 18 TFL, 18.5 TFLs, 10.5 sacks, and he had 4 sacks against the UCF in that upset win. Navy's trending upward. Their run game's clicking. The past couple years, Navy's run game's kind of been, here and there, kind of mediocre, but it's clicking of late. They got a strong inside run game. As for Army's defense, I mean, they're not as strong as in other years, but they're not weak per se. 23 points per game on defense. The rush defense is a concern. They're allowing 193.5 yards per game on the ground. So of course that's a concern playing a triple option team. It's a team effort on offense. You have 3 quarterbacks gaining significant action: Tyler, Cade Ballard, and Jamel Jones. You have 2 fullbacks in Jacoby Buchanan and Tyson Riley, combining for over 700 yards. Tyler, leading the team in rushing with 600 yards. So, this game seems like a toss-up this year, but I got Army. Honestly, I think it's gonna be a very low scoring game. I got it 14-10 Army, but yeah,
Is that
3
because
o'clock
of
CBS.
excellent defense, or is that because just an abysmal offense?
I think it's great. I think it's great defenses. That's what I think it is. I think it's great defenses. Kind of like Georgia's standout performance against Florida in the 2015 Florida Georgia game, where they held that vaunted Treon Harris offense to 3 points. So that's what I think it is.
I gotcha. No, definitely. I'll be honest, I don't have an informed opinion on either team. I haven't watched much Army football, haven't watched much Navy football. So I'll trust your opinion on that. We'll see, obviously, who ends up winning that one. Omar, I understand we do have some D2 and as well, and some D3 matchups this weekend. What's going on with those?
Yeah, so if you have a 2 TV setup, 2 screen setup this weekend, like I will, you're gonna want
I
to at
believe
least
both of us do. Yeah.
we do, but the second screen's going off during Army Navy. I will say that. But you're gonna want to keep both screens on just because it's Army Navy, and I guess it's Army Navy week in FBS,
I
and you
will
have
say,
FCS
Omar, that
games.
is not true. It will be on during Army Navy. because you can get the sky cam, which is very helpful in these offenses, by the way, on the CBS Sports mobile app. So just saying, you can get that, a permanent sky cam, and then screencast it to the second TV. So
I would rather not. I think we
fair
both know who I
enough.
am. I would rather not. I do. I enjoy the finer elements of a college football broadcast. Um, but we're different in that aspect. But beginning with these games, I don't have the times exactly, but all these games can be seen. Actually, let me pull those up. All these games for the Division 3 level can be pulled up on ESPN Plus and the Division 2 level, actually, too, for that matter. So starting off with, let me pull up the TV schedule. I have the stats ready. Starting off with Wartburg versus Mountain Union. Everyone knows about Mountain Union. Of course, Pierre Garcon is a great alumnus, of the Mountain Union program. They've been producing players left and right. It seems like they make the Division 3 title game every single year. They're a power bowl. On the other hand, it's a complete opposite where you have Wartburg. Wartburg's making their first ever semifinals appearance against Mount Union. And honestly, these teams are just mirror images of each other. Wartburg's allowing 8 points per game on defense. Mount Union's allowing 7. Wartburg's led by a strong running back in Hunter Clayson, who has 1,516 yards, 1,516 yards and 20 touchdowns. Mountain Union has DeAndre Parker, who has 1,251 yards and 18 touchdowns. So honestly, I'm not sure who's going to prevail, whether it be the defense is prevailing or the run game's prevailing. It'll be intriguing to see. I can't say that I've watched a lot of Wartburg or Mountain Union football, but I'm excited for this one, honestly, just looking at the two running backs, the dominant running backs. So that one's at 12 Eastern on ESPN Plus, or the first Division 3 semifinal. The next one at 3:30 Eastern time. This one's kind of a sexier matchup. These two teams were in the semifinals last year. Of course, North Central. It's North Central versus Mary Hardin Baylor. Mary Hardin Baylor won the championship last year in the Stag Bowl. Pulling up the score for that one right now. Yeah, so Mary Hardin Baylor won the Stag Bowl last year against North Central. So this is a rematch of last year's Division 3 championship. Last year we talked about North Central and Andrew Kaminsky, who earned a Hula Bowl invite and played well. He got some targets in Hula Bowl, but I think he deserves a pro shot, whether it be the XFL, the USFL, and even the NFL. But a rematch of last year's title game. North Central's defense is allowing 5 points per game. If you didn't think these defenses could get any better in Division 3, well, they are, because North Central's allowing 5 points per game. Their offense is scoring 54 points per game. They're led by Ethan Greenfield, who has 1,751 yards and 23 touchdowns. And they have not one, not two, but 3 players with over 10 rushing touchdowns in this North Central offense. Just explosive like they were last year. Mary Hardin Baylor is allowing 14 points per game, and they're led by a strong passing game, unlike the other 3 teams I've mentioned, where Kyle King has 3,429 yards and 39 touchdowns for the Crusaders. So 2 great Division 3 semifinals. Wartburg Mountain Union at 12, and excuse me, lost my train of thought. North Central Mary Hardin Baylor rematch of last year's Stag Bowl at 3:30 Eastern, both on ESPN Plus. Jackson, if you want to cut in before I do the D2 previews, go right on ahead. Give me a break really quick.
No, absolutely, man. That's the beautiful thing that I always love about December is on the surface, it seems like these are a little bit slower, but then really you just get to enjoy all levels of football, man. I've said it before, you get to enjoy the NFL. There is plenty of FBS action to go around, even though it is only one game this weekend, but you can pretty easily get into FCS playoffs, D2, D3. And the beauty of all this, man, is that now this wasn't the case a few years ago. Now it's all on ESPN Plus. You can put it all on one screen and have endless action if you have like an Apple TV or something like that, where it allows you to put multiple games on for ESPN Plus. So not that we get paid by ESPN or anything or Disney to put that out there, but it's awesome, man, that we have access to this now, because I think if you're a casual fan that is not into Warburton football, maybe you wouldn't go to the strides of finding the broadcast online and just do it like you would watch any other game now, which is awesome. So
going on to the Division 2 final, or semifinals. You have two more great games with Ferris State versus West Florida. West Florida being a household name, of course, the 2019 national champions. Everyone remembers Austin Reed, of course, who is again transferring and just increasing his stock by the day, it seems like, with strong performances. But Ferris State has 14.5 points per game, and they have the best defensive player that you've never heard of in Caleb Murphy, who had 24.5 sacks and 36 tackles for loss across the season for Ferris State, for the Bulldogs out there in Michigan. Of course, West Florida, they have a strong pass game. They have a strong balance attack, should say, not just a strong pass game. But they're led by David Durden, 51 catches, 12 touchdowns, and 1,030 yards. That one should be a great game. Ferris State won the championship last year, and their opponent was. I looked this up. There's just so much research to do here. But Ferris State won the championship last year, and they beat Valdosta State, a program that you know very well, Jackson. So going on to the second semifinal game, again, we've mentioned so many running backs. Let's start mentioning some quarterbacks here. And you have two great quarterbacks. The Shepherd Rams are led by Tyson Bagent, who has 4,415 yards and 41 touchdowns. And in addition to that, you'll see him at 12 Eastern time on January 15th in the or it's 15th or 16th. January, whenever the Hula Bowl is, you'll see him on CBS Sports Network in the Hula Bowl, because he has got invited to the Hula Bowl with such a strong season. And of course, Shepherd's led by Ronnie Brown at running back, not that Ronnie Brown for the Dolphins in the late 2000s, early 2010s. But Ronnie Brown had 1,690 yards and 18 touchdowns for Shepherd Rams. And facing them is the Colorado School of Mines, who has a great quarterback of their own in John Matoka, who has 4,199 yards and 45 touchdowns. So, I mean, eight great playoff games across Division II and Division III. So I'm excited for it. I'll be flipping around those games, in the early hours.
These are all the games that I would have a notebook out when you're watching these D3 games. And just write down some really, good players that you see on there. And then a few months later, during day 3 of the NFL draft, tweet them out to NFL Network for the Stump the Truck segment, where you can tweet in a name and see if NFL media has highlights ready just in case they get drafted. So definitely will be something to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're an FCF guy, right? So you remember Jerdy Dude, he's a St. John's alum from Minnesota, a Division III
Absolutely,
school.
man. You'll see these guys if you're into professional football outside of the NFL and CFL. You'll definitely see these names. So
Exactly, yeah. So whether it be FCF, USFL, XFL too, but and of course NFL. That's
rip to
ultimate
the
goal.
Vipers, but now gotta rep the Guardians. So
Yeah. So the thing with the Vipers, they don't have a stadium yet, so that's a bigger issue right now. I'm not sure if you've been looking at the news of the Vipers. Everyone's announced their stadium, but the Vipers. So and also too, their uniforms don't have Vegas on them, so they might not be playing in Vegas.
I'm switching over to the Orlando Guardians now. So I'm sorry to say.
So I was a fan of the New York Guardians my junior year at the academy,
They've
and
got a
I'm
better
a fan that's hurt by relocation. The XFL has hurt me by relocating my favorite franchise, so I will not be a Guardians fan. Now I know how Rams fans feel, how St. Louis Rams fans feel.
Omar, oh my gosh,
I'm
man.
just hurt. I'm hurt that The Rock would move my favorite franchise from the biggest media market in the country, a team that I went to go watch, a team that I rode the train, and then the bus from Union from Port Authority all the way to MetLife Stadium just to see him on a weekend. I am absolutely pissed that they would
Now you can go to
relocate
Disney World and watch the Guardians though in Orlando. So with
You know
that,
what? I'm pissed
with those
because
beautiful USF looking uniforms, by the way.
the Citrus Bowl won't be rocking. The Citrus Bowl will not be rocking. MetLife was rocking when the Guardians were in New York. So I am just very angry that my team's been relocated and my voice is not heard.
Yeah, well now you know how St. Louis fans feel, right? So definitely, man. Well, hey, that's about it for me. Anything else before we hop off?
No, just a great weekend of football. And of course, I gotta say, beat Navy, go Army, beat Navy. Yeah, and until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.